We're here this morning at Eddie Motorsports. I'm Jeff Smith, and we're going to show you all the pieces you need to install a Serpentine accessory drive system on a small block Chevy. The first thing you need to know is that when you purchase the system, everything that you need is right in these two boxes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take all these parts out of the packages and show you how to install them on this small block Chevy behind me. The first thing you'll notice is that the hardware is installed with the brackets in this particular case. So what we're going to do, this is the power steering and alternator bracket, and this is the opposite side. And what these pieces are going to do is space the water pump out away from the block to establish a proper center line. First thing we're going to do is install these studs in the water pump passage, and then we're going to double nut this, just to make sure it's nice and tight, and then just spin it in with the wrench. You don't want to put a lot of torque on this, because if you do, one of these bolts holes are actually blind, and if you put too much torque on it, it'll crack the block. So just nice and simple, nice and tight. So the next step, after we've got our studs locked in place, and make sure you put the longer stud on the passenger side on the bottom, because the water pump is a little bit longer on this side. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put a little piece of RTV on here to seal this O-ring, and then this bracket, once we do that, then this bracket will go on this side, and then the smaller bracket will go on that side. The power steering pump bracket's going to go on next, and you'll see these two raised portions. They go inside these recessed portions right here. Line those in place. So what you want to make sure is put a little RTV on these O-rings. That'll keep it from leaking. They'll also hold them in place. Before we put the water pump on, it's always a good idea just to put a little bit of anti-seize on each of these fasteners, because what we have is these are all stainless fasteners. Then it's just a simple process of sliding the water pump in place and then installing the spacers. Now we have 4 spacers, but the shorter one goes on the longer stud here, and you'll see there's a small little ridge. That tells you this is the SAE side and not the metric side. And then we'll just slide them in place, thread them in place. You also want to leave these loose, because we're going to be doing some other installations, and it makes it a lot easier to line everything up first rather than tightening everything up right away. The front plate is the next piece we're going to install. And again, you'll put a little anti-seize on each of these fasteners. Once we have these tight, then we can tighten up the studs behind. As far as power steering pumps are concerned, the standard kit comes with a plastic reservoir like this. This is a TC pump, which is typically used on the new Corvettes. It's a much smaller pump than the old Saginaw style, far more efficient. If you want to step up a little bit, make something look a little brighter, they've got a billet power steering reservoir that's still integrated to the pump. And then if you really want to go trick, you can actually go to an external reservoir. Sometimes that's important if you need the clearance around the engine, or it's a really tight engine compartment like on a street rod, something like that. And as far as pumps are concerned, there's actually 2 different options that Eddie Motorsports gives you. On the TC pump, the power steering boxes, like on early Camaros and Chevelles and other cars, require one style of pressure and flow, but on a rack and pinion, let's say on an aftermarket package, an aftermarket frame, that the valving is a little bit different, and it requires a different application, and they give you that option. So next step is to install the power steering pump. We're going to start by installing this little nice banjo fitting that's included with the kit. And you'll also notice that the pulley is already also installed, so that you don't have to mess around with a separate tool that you have to buy to pull that pulley on. And with the windowed package the way it is, the installation bolt access is really easy. Just come right through with a Allen bolt. The AC compressor is the next step in the installation process, really simple. You'll notice too that there's 2 bolts to go into the bottom. There's a stepped bolt in the back and then a standard bolt in the front. And even though we've tightened our bolts up already, you can notice that this just slides right in. That really shows you just how solid the machining is here, because generally you would have to keep these bolts loose in order to make that all work. Then the next thing is, you'll notice the AC compressor comes with a cover on it, and 2 small little metric bolts. You might hear a little pressure release because the factory, Sandin generally supplies these things pressure nitrogen charged so that there's no corrosion. We want to take this cover off, and then we'll install the new billet cover that has the pieces on it, the connections for your AC. So the only time you want to actually install these is when you're ready to install the AC, and not before. That way you keep the compressor integrated and sealed up, and then you won't have any problems. And the kit comes with a nice cover that slides in place. Three small fasteners. And the AC is complete. So as you see, we have a PowerMaster 140 amp alternator we're going to install next. And one of the nice things about these alternators, besides just the fact that it bolts on really easily, is the late model alternators are really great to use, because especially if you have a fuel injection package, what can happen is earlier style alternators can generate some noise that is very hard to pick up. You almost need an oscilloscope to find it, but that noise can be picked up by the fuel injection system. So late model alternators like this are really nice because they don't have those same problems. So in addition to looking great, this is also highly functional, and we're talking about 140 amps of output maximum. And again, the later model alternators also offer really good power at idle. So you're picking up probably close to 100 amps right off idle, which you don't have with the older alternators. So it's just a nice added feature. That's why Eddie Motorsports uses the good stuff. Crank pulleys, next step we're going to do, very simple, bolt-on application, nicely highly polished stuff, billet, and then these are Belleville washers, which are really nice because what it does, it adds a nice little tension, and it's almost like a lock washer, but it's far better. And it's just a matter of just installing the bolts. And once we get these bolted in place, then we'll go ahead and put the crank bolt on, and we'll torque that in place. Starting to look like a real system now. Water pump pulley is next. And just line up the bolt holes, because there's 2 different patterns. So you might notice this has a black coating on the belt pulley portion of it, and that's actually hard coated that's installed after it's machined. Okay, part of the Eddie Motorsports kit is a Gates belt tensioner. You would not want to run some kind of a serpentine system without a spring-loaded tensioner. The advantage to a spring-loaded tensioner is when the engine's in operation and the belt's spinning, there's a standing wave that runs through this entire system at speed. And what happens is when that standing wave hits your tensioner, it will actually, if it's a fixed tensioner, it'll slip. So all the OEs use a spring-loaded tensioner. That way, when that standing wave comes around and hits the tensioner will also take that into account and maintain the belt's tension so that the whole system doesn't slip. So it's a very simple system, and the advantage is it just slides right on. You see these 2 little pins go right into these holes here, and then it just bolts in place, and then there's a cover that goes over it. So it's just a matter of bolting it in place. Anytime you see a smooth portion on a pulley, so you see the tensioner here or the water pump, that shows you that that goes with the back side of the belt. And anytime you see a ribbed portion, obviously that goes with the ribbed portion of the belt. So pretty simple stuff. You also want to do the largest pulley last because it has the largest radius, so it makes it easier to install. So a matter of kicking this over like this, Get your 1/2 inch ratchet on here. Make sure all your grooves are aligned. Let loose the tension. And it's all lined up and it's ready to go. And then the spring establishes the tension on the belt, so you never have to worry about trying to over tighten the belt. So once we have the belt installed, the last thing we want to do is put the cover on. And that goes on last, obviously, because we have to use the ratchet in order to establish the tension. So all we have left to do is put this nice little Eddie Motorsports cover over this tensioner. So with these 2 small little countersunk screws tightened in place, that's the entire installation. Took us less than an hour to do this whole thing, and no shimming, no machining, no harsh words. It was a very simple system to install, and you can see how compact and tight it is on this small block Chevy, way inside the valve covers, which is really nice. Plus that also keeps your belt shorter, and just a nice compact system. And we did it all with a small collection of hand tools in a very short period of time. That's the installation on Eddie Motorsports S-Drive Serpentine system.